Long before Rome was an empire, before the Colosseum even existed, another great power ruled the Italian peninsula. They were this incredible mix of artists, engineers, and sailors. Their culture was just so sophisticated, their society totally unique. And where they came from? Well, that's still one of history's biggest puzzles. So today, let's dive in and try to unlock the story of this amazing, mysterious civilization.
So, who were they? What great civilization laid all the groundwork for Rome, only to kind of vanish into the mists of time?
They were the Etruscans, and for centuries, that name has pretty much been a synonym for mystery. Today, we're going to crack open some of their secrets.
Okay, so before we even get to the mystery of where they came from, we first have to get a handle on just how big of a deal they were. See, the Etruscans weren't just a few scattered tribes. They were an organized, powerful force to be reckoned with in the ancient world.
Their heartland, a place they called Etruria, was pretty much right where modern Tuscany is today. But their influence? Oh, it stretched way beyond that, from the Po Valley all the way down to Campania in the south. They were organized into this powerful league of 12 city-states, the Dodecapoli, which included absolute powerhouses like Veii and Tarquinia. And even though each city was independent, they were all tied together by the same language, religion, and culture. That made them a really formidable presence.
And that brings us to the big one, the central question that historians have been fighting over for more than 2,000 years. Where on earth did the Etruscans come from?
Seriously, this ancient argument has given us some fascinating theories. On one hand, you've got the Greek historian Herodotus, who said they came from Lydia, that's modern-day Turkey, to escape a famine. But then another historian, Dionysius, totally disagreed. He argued they were native to Italy, an indigenous people totally distinct from everyone else. The modern view is a bit of a mix, suggesting they were a local culture that just evolved through contact with others. But get this, recent DNA studies have actually found genetic links back to the Near East, which kind of gives Herodotus's old stories some new life. The debate is definitely not over.
But as fascinating as the origin mystery is, it's how the Etruscans lived that really sets them apart. Their social structure, their relationship with the gods, it was unlike anything else in the ancient world.
One of the most striking things about them was the status of women. In Greece and later in Rome, women were mostly kept at home, but in Etruria? No way. They were out there, active participants in public life. They went to banquets, they dined right alongside the men, they had their own names, they were educated, and you see them in art as equal partners. This wasn't just some little social quirk. It tells you this was a society that really valued women's roles.
Now, as you can imagine, this was pretty shocking to outsiders. The Greek historian Theopompus saw this equality and basically said it was a sign of mortal decay that made men weak. Honestly, his comment tells us a lot more about Greek anxieties than it does about Etruscan reality, but it just goes to show how radically different their world was.
This unique social life was completely tied up with a deeply spiritual worldview. For the Etruscans, the universe was just buzzing with messages from the gods. They believed the gods were constantly sending signs through nature, and their main religious practice, the Etruscan discipline, was this incredibly complex system for reading those messages. The key thing here is, they didn't believe they could change fate, only that they could understand it and act the right way.
So how'd they do it? Well, their priests had a few tools in their toolkit. There was haruspice, which involved examining the liver of a sacrificed animal, seeing it as like a map of the cosmos. Then there was augury, reading the flight patterns of birds, but their real specialty was fulgurology, the study of lightning. They actually divided the sky into 16 different regions, and where a lightning bolt hit had a super specific meaning. It was like a science of reading the divine.
And this whole complex, unique way of seeing the world wasn't just for rituals. No, they poured it into absolutely stunning works of art and some truly groundbreaking engineering. The Etruscans weren't just mystics, they were master craftspeople.
Just take a look at their pottery. This is Bucchero ware, their signature stuff. They had this special firing process that created this glossy, jet black pottery that almost looks like metal. It was so unique and so prized that we find pieces of it all across the Mediterranean, which tells you just how big their trade network was.
They were also absolute masters of terracotta, clay sculpture. Their skill was so famous that when the early Romans were building their most sacred and important temple, the Temple of Jupiter on the Capitoline Hill, who did they call? Not a Roman artist. They hired an Etruscan, the great Vulca of Veii, to make the main statue.
And their work in bronze? Oh man, it was simply breathtaking.
They perfected this really difficult lost wax casting method to create these incredible masterpieces, like the terrifying Chimera of Arezzo or the noble warrior statue, the Marte dei Todi. You can see a blend of Greek style in their work, but with this dynamic energy and realism that is uniquely Etruscan.
Beyond their art, they were brilliant engineers. So they didn't invent the arch, but they perfected how to use it in things like city gates, bridges, and sewers. And this was the foundational technology that their successors, the Romans, would adopt and scale up to build their aqueducts, their amphitheaters, and, well, their entire empire.
So you're probably asking, okay, if they were so advanced and powerful, what happened to them? The answer isn't one big dramatic battle. It's more of a long, slow absorption by their very ambitious and very fast-growing neighbor, Rome.
You can really see how it happens step by step here. It started at sea in 474 BC when their navy got smashed. Then the fight moved to the land. The fall of the city of Veii to Rome after a long siege was a huge blow. About 100 years later, one last big coalition was crushed by the Roman legions. But the final step wasn't even military. It was political. Around 90 BC, all Etruscans were just granted Roman citizenship.
And this is maybe the most important takeaway. The Etruscans weren't wiped out. They were integrated. Their lands became a formal part of Roman Italy, called Regio VII Etruria. They even kept the name. Their powerful families joined the Roman Senate. Their gods were folded into the Roman pantheon, and their knowledge just became part of the fabric of Roman life. Which leaves us with a final thought, doesn't it? When we look at the arches, the rituals, and the foundations of Rome, are we looking at something that replaced the Etruscans, or are we just looking at the Etruscans themselves, living on under a new name? It's a question that reminds you that history is often less about things disappearing and more about them transforming into something new.